Lin Yuan had also carefully memorized the life-form sacrificial fire's characteristics. The current situation, the vitality in that flaming green light, and the pure fire element energy in the flaming red light were very consistent with the knowledge of the life-form sacrificial fire that the Moon Empress had mentioned. Lin Yuan let out a deep breath. If this flame was really the life-form sacrificial fire, he had to get it no matter what. The life-form sacrificial fire was ranked 7th in the world's fire element spiritual materials because it could be used as a tree core to reshape the second life of the dying plant Fae. It could be said that the life-form sacrificial fire was a kind of sacred item that could give a second life to a dying plant. However, Lin Yuan was currently not at the bottom of the red flame vortex, so he could not use Morbius tree data to check whether this was the life-form sacrificial fire. If this flaming green light containing a powerful life form or was the life form sacrificial fire, the flaming red light that had burst into the sky must be from a legendary plant. It must be a kind of Fae only able to be born in this majestic, pure fire elemental environment. This succulent Fae should be the Red Pagoda. This life form sacrificial fire, ranked 7th among the world's fire element spiritual materials, was created by the legendary plant Red Pagoda after exhausting all its body energy. Lin Yuan did not immediately rush toward the red vortex but stood in place, silently waiting. The purple-black land under Lin Yuan's feet caved in a short while, forming a bucket-sized vortex of quicksand. A piece of yellow metal that was held up by the quicksand in the vortex. It was filled with cutting marks. Lin Yuan squatted and carefully examined this strange yellow metal and then stood up. This strange yellow metal was very common in the Radiance Federation. It was a Fae-trapping metal, the primary material to make the Fae storage box, and its own metal characteristic was that it could isolate the aura of Faes. Lin Yuan thought, I was indeed right. There's really a huge problem. A metal like this Fae-trapping metal would not be found in a Class 3 Abyss dimensional rift. At the same time, there was an issue with the flaming green light that had burst into the sky containing the aura of life forms and the flaming red light that could form a flame vortex. Under normal circumstances, precious spiritual materials like the life-form sacrificial fire or the Red Pagoda Fae should have long been discovered by the adventurers who had come to train this controlled Class 3 dimensional rift. This also meant that someone had deliberately used this metal Fae-trapping metal to do something. No matter who this person was, they were certainly not a good person. The reason was simple. If the demons roaming in the controlled Class 3 dimensional rift discovered that they contained such potent energy and placed it on the central hub where the Source Sea communicated with the abyssal world. Then, this controlled Class 3-dimensional rift, which was now a pinnacle Class 2-dimensional rift, would revert to a Class 3-dimensional rift. In the worst case, the hub that was connected to the abyssal world might expand due to the huge amount of energy, causing this controlled Class 3 Abyss-dimensional rift to become a Class 4 Abyss-dimensional rift. If this really happened, it would be a disaster for the adventurers training in this Abyss-dimensional rift in the Radiance Federation. This controlled Class 3 Abyss-dimensional rift opened in the royal capital suburbs, not far away. If it turned into a Class 4-dimensional rift and caught the Radiance Federation unprepared, a large number of demons would rush forth from it. In that case, even if the Radiance Federation's top experts were to take action, the Radiance Federation's outskirts would be turned into scorched earth under the Class 4 Abyss-dimensional rift's sudden opening. Class 6-dimensional lifeforms existed in the Class 4-dimensional rift, and they had the strength equivalent to suzerain Faes. Moreover, this Class 4-dimensional rift was an Abyss-dimensional rift, in which the demon's genetic model was complicated. They had the strongest single-target capabilities among the dimensional lifeforms of the same class. Even if a Class 5 demon ran out, it would turn the royal capital's outskirts into a place of disaster, not to mention a few Class 6 demons that were akin to suzerain Faes. Lin Yuan did not choose to hide his strength this time. He used his spiritual power, and the purple-black earth within 100 meters of him instantly turned into a quicksand vortex. The center of the quicksand vortex condensed a pair of huge half-arms that made a lifting action. Lin Yuan stepped on the palm, standing proudly. The quicksand vortex within 100 meters instantly churned, and thousands of black feathers formed by the day and night spirit silver separated from the quicksand vortex. These thousands of black feathers formed 4 elegant black wings on Lin Yuan's back. Lin Yuan flapped the wings and headed to the distant red flame vortex. Chapter 265, The Dark Federation's Signature Fae. Lin Yuan flapped his 4 wings and flew very skillfully in the air. This was not his first time using the day and night spirit silver feathered wings to fly. During the previous month or so of training, he had not only mastered the skill of manipulating the source-type source sand, but he had also learned how to use its metal-consume manifestation wings to fly. At that time, he had chosen the day and night spirit silver as the second metal for the source sand's metal consume manifestation to consume partly because it was almost weightless. The day and night spirit silver wings could allow Lin Yuan to fly faster and save more spiritual power while flapping them. At present, the day and night spirit silver feathers differed greatly from before. After referencing many avian fays, Lin Yuan had decided on the feather shape of the platinum avian fay, the divine travel black swallow. It had to be said that although it was uncomfortable sitting on the divine travel black swallow, its feather shape determined its specialty of flying. Of course, Lin Yuan had also made certain improvements to the divine travel black swallow's feathers. He had reduced the thickness at the edge of the feathers so that the feathers became sharper, and many bubble-shaped hollow parts were created in the feathers. These improvements could allow the limited 1 cubic meter day and night spirit silver to spawn more feathers. After Lin Yuan injected spiritual power, the feathers' hollow parts would turn from black feathers to white feathers. This could greatly increase the white feathers against external attacks and provide cushioning protection due to the day and night spirit silver's metal characteristics. Lin Yuan's current flight speed was extremely fast, almost as fast as an ordinary gold avian fay. However, he needed to consume a certain amount of spiritual power for such flights. Even though he did not channel the spiritual power to the day and night spirit silver to allow the feathers to become white, flapping these 4 wings still consumed spiritual power. It was unlike the many sand grains the source sand had created under the ground that could be freely controlled with its consciousness. While Lin Yuan was flying, the source sand was also rapidly creating sand grains. At the same time, the previous yellow sand gathered toward the flame vortex's direction. Back when the flame that contained the life form aura had shot up to the sky, the middle-aged man at the entrance of the dimensional rift, spying on the adventurers who had entered the dimensional rift, looked appalled and horrified. At that moment, almost all the adventurers who were training in the Class 3 dimensional rift saw the flaming green light burst into the sky. They also saw the flaming red light that covered the flaming green light, forming a flame vortex. In the Abyss Dimensional Rift, such a situation would only be possible because of the Abyss Dimensional Rift's strange flames. However, they had never heard of any strange flames that could cause such a degree of dimensional rift mutation. Many adventurers or small groups of adventurers in the Abyss Dimensional Rift thought they had the ability to head toward the Crimson Flame Vortex. Of course, there was no lack of adventurers trying to take their chances. However, most of them wanted to leave this controlled Class 3 Dimensional Rift. This was because those with a discerning eye could see that due to the Dimensional Zone's mutation, it had become a place where they were apt to get into trouble. The speed at which this Crimson Abyssal Vortex was absorbing this Class 3 Dimensional Rift's flame energy was simply too fast. The year-round 50 degrees in the controlled Class 3 Dimensional Rift had become less than 20 degrees, which was not even as high as that of the Royal Capital's late autumn. This made the adventurers who were used to the Abyss Dimensional Rift's temperature feel a chill all over their bodies. Many of them were ready to leave this controlled Class 3 Abyss Dimensional Rift. But suddenly, they discovered that the Class 3 Abyss Dimensional Rift had undergone mutation because of the Crimson Flame Vortex absorbing the fire elements, causing the Dimensional Rift entrance to be closed. In other words, it had formed into a no entry and no exit zone. Any means of communication were unavailable in the Dimensional Rift, including the Star Web car. Such a situation caused the adventurers at the entrance of the Abyss Dimensional Rift to panic. At that moment, the King-class experts sent by the Radiance Federation's Spirit Guards to this controlled Class 3 Abyss Dimensional Rift stepped forward and controlled the situation. The controlled Dimensional Rift in the Radiance Federation was usually under the Spirit Guards' control. Every 10 years during the active period of the Dimensional Rift, the Spirit Guards would close the previously controlled Dimensional Rift. Once the active period passed, the Spirit Guards would once again select a suitable Dimensional Rift to control. This was a resource for the Radiance Federation's younger generation to train and for the Guild Alliance's registered Spirit Chief professionals to maintain their livelihood. The fact that the Spirit Guards had arranged for Zhao Zhongcheng to guard the controlled Class 3 of this Dimensional Rift on the Royal Capital's outskirts showed that he was highly valued and must also be extremely strong. After becoming a King-class expert, the Class 3 of this Dimensional Rift beneath Zhao Zhongcheng's feet was no longer the first Class 3 Dimensional Rift he had guarded. However, even if he was strong and knowledgeable, it was the first time that he had seen this happen before his eyes. Just as he was controlling the overall situation and pacifying the adventurers, the middle-aged man who usually stayed at the entrance of the Dimensional Rift all day unknowingly left the rift entrance and headed toward the Crimson Flame Vortex in a hurry. Fear slowly covered the shock in the middle-aged man's eyes, whom the others would not take a second glance at. He hesitated for a long time and finally reached out to take off his thin mask. After the mask was taken off, it slowly turned into a fat brown worm that was like soft mud. If Zhao Zhancheng, the strongest member of the spirit guards who was guarding the controlled Class 3 Abyss Dimensional Rift, saw this brown, fat, soft mud-like worm, he would have exclaimed in surprise. This was because this fat brown worm was not a Fae produced by the Radiance Federation's sphere of influence. Such a Fae came from the Dark Federation region, which was very far from the Radiance Federation. It was considered the Dark Federation's signature Fae. This middle-aged man had a very strange charm on his face after he removed the mask that seemed to have formed a rather eerie-looking crow. He took out a crystal bottle containing a drop of black blood and was at a loss for a while. He finally smeared the black blood on the strange charm on his face while trembling. His gaze became disorientated, just like death, in an instant. Just as the middle-aged man was about to fall to the ground, a scarlet color suddenly emerged in his black-green eyes. This scarlet color had a triangular pattern in his eyes that was like a crow's beak. At that moment, the middle-aged man's aura completely changed. When he came back to his senses, he crushed the soft mud-like fat brown worm in his hand and said in a gloomy voice, "Useless thing. You can't even do what I told you well. You're worthy of being a piece of trash that incompetent Cheng Yu had trained. I would like to see who is actually going to touch my life-form sacrificial fire." Chapter 266, Dragon Gate's Appearance. There was a youth wearing dark blue traditional clothes. He was standing on a piece of protruding purple-black rock and facing the scarlet-red whirlpool that was rapidly absorbing fire elements. There was one red and one blue jellyfish floating in midair and revolving around the youth in dark blue clothes. A youth with bowl-cut hair commanded a giant stingray, which was entirely dark blue and had some strange light blue patterns. The giant stingray was rapidly slaughtering a group of Class 3 Abyss lifeforms, horn-tailed demons. They were considered the demons among the Class 3 demons to have the toughest physical defense. The horn-tailed demon's strongest attacks would be to brandish the 3-scale armored tails with spikes to lash and sting. When being lashed by this scale armored tail, even silver metals would be broken. If the spikes on the tail were to sting, most of the silver metals would be immediately penetrated. However, this small group of horn-tailed demons, equivalent to gold phase, was easily sliced up into countless pieces by this giant stingray. The group of horn-tailed demons was desperately lashing their tails on the giant stingray. However, even with all the tail spikes, they weren't enough to harm the giant stingray. In fact, when the tails lashed on the water barrier around the stingray, there weren't even any obvious ripples. This youth with the bowl-cut hair was none other than Fang Duoduo. The Dragon Gate Guild Club had entered this controlled Class 3 Abyss Dimensional Rift for over a month. During this period of time, a total of 9 members from both the main team and reserve team had been training on the battlefield and building teamwork with their Faes. For individual combat, one would need to consider how to fight efficiently with multiple Faes. The distribution of spiritual power, combination of abilities, and exclusive skills between each Fae would decide on the combat power and combat style. For a group of spirit chi professionals, the consideration during combat wasn't that big a difference. It was still the combination and coordination of abilities and exclusive skills between multiple Faes. However, instead of an individual strength, it would be a group strength. When a veteran spirit chi professional team was in combat, they wouldn't summon all of the Faes. Each individual would only summon 2 Faes or even just one main Fae to coordinate. They would try to distribute most of the spirit chi to their strongest Fae, allowing for the best efficiency in the usage of spirit chi. During special circumstances, they would then summon other Faes to counter or respond. In many situations during team combat, those Faes that weren't the main force would block damage or use attacks that inflicted negative statuses. At this moment, the Dragon Gate Guild Club's original 9 members were now left with 4. One of the main team members had brought 4 reserve members to return to the Royal Capital's Dragon Gate Guild Club's main base. They were going to conduct the final enhancement of their fuse quality and grade before the tournament season. Fang Duoduo raised his head and looked at Long Dao. "Boss, this side is already finishing. There isn't much to control with these horn-tailed demons." Long Dao didn't reply after listening and merely nodded before he continued to observe the scarlet flame vortex that had suddenly appeared in the sky. It looked as though he was trying his best to recall something in his mind. Once Fang Duoduo kept his Platinum 2, Fantasy 2 Rapid Fear Ray back into his spiritual spatial zone, he saw Zhao Xiaochun holding an orange. As soon as Zhao Xiaochun finished peeling the orange skin, she placed a huge piece of orange flesh into her mouth and enjoyed the fruit. Fang Duoduo quickly leaned over and said, "Those who see shall have a share. Zhao Xiaochun, you need to share half of your remaining orange with me." Zhao Xiaochun quickly lowered her head in response and stuffed the remaining half of the orange into her mouth. She then looked at Fang Duoduo with a pleased expression. Her eyes were implying, "This lady peeled this orange. What rights do you have to eat it?" Fang Duoduo immediately felt wronged and took a glance at Chen Hongfeng, who was controlling the huge-tailed swamp lizard to finish off the Class 3 horn-tailed demons that were all on the verge of death. Subsequently, Fang Duoduo climbed up to the protruding rock that Long Dao was standing on and chuckled as he said, "Boss, your platinum fantasy deep blue dragon jellyfish are really getting stronger." Long Dao couldn't help rubbing his temples. "Fang Duoduo, what do you wish to say?" he asked helplessly. When Fang Duoduo heard that, he responded immediately, "Boss, Zhao Xiaochun has been slacking off. During the last few waves of demons, she didn't even do anything. She's just peeling fruits." Zhao Xiaochun, who was still chewing on the orange, was nearly choked to death by Fang Duoduo's words. Zhao Xiaochun had a preference for sour taste, so she would buy very sour oranges. When the orange juice flowed into her nasal cavity, her tears nearly burst out. Long Dao felt his temples twitching with pain as he looked at Fang Duoduo, who was seriously making a complaint that the choked Zhao Xiaochun, who was coughing violently. During this month of training, Fang Duoduo and Zhao Xiaochun had never stopped quarreling. Long Dao felt that even if he encountered a group of Class 4 demons, it might not be as intense as the quarrel between Fang Duoduo and Zhao Xiaochun. At this moment, Zhao Xiaochun snuck a glance at Chen Hongfeng and gave him an eye signal. When Chen Hongfeng received the eye signal, he immediately said, "Boss, Fang Duoduo made Big Sister Xiaochun cry earlier." Long Dao placed his hand on his forehead as an indication that he didn't wish to speak. Zhao Xiaochun immediately threw an orange to Chen Hongfeng and gave a praising look. Fang Duoduo felt even more wronged and immediately jumped off the rock to quarrel with Zhao Xiaochun. He then requested for an orange. At that moment, Long Tao's stern voice echoed, "Duoduo, Xiaochun, Ah Feng, a treasure probably appeared in this controlled Class 3 Abyss Dimensional Rift. This treasure might be an abnormal flame that has never been mentioned. Let's go over and take a look." Zhao Xiaochun, Fang Duoduo, and Chen Hongfeng immediately stopped fooling around when they saw that Long Dao was serious. They rode on Fang Duoduo's Platinum 2 Fantasy 2 Rapid Fear Ray and flew towards the Scarlet Flame Vortex. When sitting on the Rapid Fear Ray's back, Zhao Xiaochun felt an abnormally low temperature within the Abyss Dimensional Rift. Therefore, she quickly tightened her clothes. She then took a pork trotter out of her drumstick-shaped face storage box. It was glistening with grease, and she started to gnaw on it. When the pork trotter was taken out, Fang Duoduo couldn't help swallowing his saliva. Seeing the situation, Long Dao couldn't allow this to continue. He then said to Zhao Xiaochun, who was enjoying her food, "Xiaochun, give one pork trotter to Fang Duoduo too. Look at the gluttonous Fang Duoduo. He can't even fly the Rapid Fear Ray properly." Zhao Xiaochun reluctantly tossed one pork trotter to Fang Duoduo and said, "You better taste it slowly. This is something that I won from a buffet. In the future, you will not be able to eat this pork trotter anymore." Fang Duoduo couldn't understand. "What can't I eat with money?" Zhao Xiaochun spoke in a regretful tone. "After the eating competition, I would go over to the shop to support it. After supporting it for a month, it is unknown why that shop closed down 1 month later." Lin Yuan was now in the vicinity of the Scarlet Flame Vortex. He had especially found a secluded place to land. After landing, Lin Yuan withdrew the 4 wings, causing the thousands of black feathers to fall on the ground. Once the feathers fell onto the ground, a sand whirlpool instantly fused the black feathers into the sand. At that moment, the mother of Bloodbath's peculiar and pleasant voice suddenly echoed in Lin Yuan's ears. After hearing what the mother of Bloodbath said, Lin Yuan's eyes violently contracted. Chapter 267, The Presence of a Suzerain Myth Fae. The mother of Bloodbath's pleasant voice carried a trace of doubt and seriousness. "Lin Yuan, I can feel the presence of a suzerain Myth Fae." Lin Yuan asked subconsciously, "Is it a suzerain Myth Fae or a Class 6 demon that has a suzerain phase strength?" The presence doesn't have any flame or sulfur, so it shouldn't be a presence from a demon. Lin Yuan was rather anxious when the mother of Bloodbath suddenly spoke. However, after the mother of Bloodbath confirmed it wasn't a Class 6 demon, he felt relieved. If a Class 6 demon actually appeared in this controlled Class 3 Abyss Dimensional Rift, then a huge problem would be bound to occur. However, Lin Yuan still frowned slightly and pondered. The strongest Abyss life form in this Class 3 Abyss Dimensional Rift should only be a Class 4 demon. The strength of a Class 4 demon was only equivalent to a Platinum Fae. Logically, there was nothing to attract the attention of a suzerain Myth Fae in this place. The Radiance Federation did have suzerain Myth Faes. When some of the wild Faes evolved into suzerain ones, they would choose to report to the Spirit Guards. Therefore, such Faes were considered an officially recognized expert of the Radiance Federation. Those wild suzerain Faes that chose to serve the Radiance Federation's Spirit Guards would receive great benefits and treatment. they didn't really have to fret about resources when progressing. At the same time, they would receive help from Class 4 or even Class 5 creation masters. If such suzerain phase wanted to obtain resources by themselves, they would normally venture into dimensional rifts that were opened suddenly and not yet controlled. They would then be able to obtain the source-type items in those dimensional rifts. This was the best method for suzerain phase to obtain resources. Therefore, Lin Yuan couldn't understand. Mother of Bloodbath, or suzerain myth phase able to sense each other within a certain range. The Mother of Bloodbath's pleasant and peculiar voice sounded again. The presence of a suzerain myth fae can only be sensed by another suzerain myth fae. If one of the parties intentionally withdrew their presence, the other party would have a very hard time finding the hidden fae unless the suzerain myth is innately adept at those observations. However, I am adept in offense and not observation. Lin Yuan was certain about something after hearing the answer. This suzerain myth fae shouldn't be a path protector like the Mother of Bloodbath. It wasn't protecting a young generation member who was training in this class 3 of this dimensional rift. Those prestigious clans might arrange a path protector for their descendants who were in the midst of development, but most path protectors were only king class experts or pinnacle king class experts. It was rare for any of the path protectors for these prestigious clan descendants to be at the suzerain grade. Even if there was any, it should be a human expert that was above the king class and at the suzerain grade. It shouldn't be a suzerain myth fae. In other words, if the Mother of Bloodbath was able to feel the presence of this suzerain myth breed fae, it meant that the other party wasn't concealing its presence. Lin Yuan muttered for a moment before asking, Mother of Bloodbath, did you feel this suzerain myth fae's presence before the appearance of the flame vortex or after? The Mother of Bloodbath replied in a firm tone, I felt its presence not long after the appearance of the flame vortex. However, this suzerain myth fae's presence has some problems. The Mother of Bloodbath paused for a moment before speaking again. This suzerain myth fae's presence is very weak. It is so weak that it doesn't feel like a real suzerain myth fae. The presence might be weak, but it is very pure. Lin Yuan noted down the Mother of Bloodbath's words but still couldn't understand what was going on. However, he was now 120% cautious. If this suzerain myth fae's presence appeared only after the flame vortex's appearance, it meant that the suzerain myth fae was attracted to the abnormal flame underneath the flame vortex. Lin Yuan felt his gold-eye Fantasy 1 source sand constantly creating sand, and it was nearly covering the entire ground underneath his feet. Lin Yuan couldn't help lamenting how different his source sand was as compared to other faes. In over a month, the gold fantasy source sand had created an unknown amount of sand. Every portion of sand would increase the source sand's strength. Lin Yuan rapidly injected spiritual power into the source sand, which was inside the purple-black ground. He ordered for the source sand to create sand rapidly to fill up the underground area where the red pagoda might be inside. As Lin Yuan injected his spiritual power, the gold fantasy source sand, which had been gradually creating sand, finally revealed its outstanding ability. Every grain of sand underground that contained ferromanganese's metallic properties was rapidly smashing rocks in the ground. Once the source sand received Lin Yuan's spiritual power, massive amounts of sand were being produced, rapidly spreading out with the flame vortex at the core. Lin Yuan raised his hand and used the Bronze X, the Legend Spirit Gather Goldfish's spirit injection to replenish his exhausted spiritual power. Since Lin Yuan was preparing to seize this treasure that was mutated by the natural world, he naturally had to maintain his prime in order to face any danger or challenge. As Lin Yuan walked toward the valley where the flame vortex was, he noticed plenty of spirit chi professionals at the entrance of the valley. However, these spirit chi professionals didn't move forward as they were all stuck outside the valley. Lin Yuan looked around the valley and noticed it was filled with flowing flame like fire element energy. He couldn't help being silently amazed as the flowing flame energy had nearly covered the entire interior part of the valley. The flame energy was the same as a pinnacle silver fire type phase showing its attack prowess. Most of the spirit chi professionals that were inside this class 3-dimensional rift to train or for adventure would mostly have gold phase. It was rare for anyone to possess a platinum phase. Chapter 268, 4 Wings of Protection. Those spirit chi professionals with platinum phase might be able to enter. In fact, they could also bring in 2 companions with pinnacle gold phase. But for those spirit chi professionals who didn't have platinum phase, nor companions with platinum phase, they would be stuck outside the valley. They weren't even qualified to enter the valley. Lin Yuan's arrival attracted plenty of attention from the adventurers and the youths that were here to train. Kid, don't go forward, just watch here. There is someone selling snacks over there, but the price is a little high. Lin Yuan looked to the side and noticed a fatty holding a pile of resources and hawking for sales. There were also a few other young people who were of similar age to the fatty. They were hawking and helping the fatty to sell the huge pile of resources. The hawking calls made the atmosphere rather lively. Those that didn't know would think there was a gathering for a performance. Lin Yuan didn't know whether to say that this fatty had a business mind or that he was too silly and reckless. Lin Yuan walked to the valley entrance, which had a barrier made with the flowing flame-shaped fire element energy. Just as he was about to enter, a middle-aged adventurer pulled back Lin Yuan and said, "Do you wish to die?" A few fellows earlier were confident in their strength, but after just a few meters, they were all burned to death by the fire element energy. In the beginning, the fire element energy in the valley might only be the standard of a silver phase attack, but now it already has the power of a gold phase attack. As soon as this adventurer finished talking, another adventurer said, "Do you really think you were black just because you were wearing a mask? Even if you were black, that strange plant in silver, fantasy avian species Fae would only allow you to enter the valley filled with fire element energy." Lin Yuan raised his brows. This brother seems to be very knowledgeable. If I use red thorn and Chima, it is true that I would not be able to enter this valley that is filled with fire element energy. However, I don't plan to use red thorn and Chima to enter. If Lin Yuan wanted to enter this valley, he had two methods. The first method was to summon the silver fantasy jasmine lily and ask it to use its heal ability on him. He would then fill his body with vitality energy to walk through forcefully. Even if the flowing flame energy injured him, the jasmine lily's concentrated vitality energy would immediately heal the wounds. But if that was the case, Lin Yuan would have to burn off a layer of skin, grow a new layer of skin, and repeat the process of torture. Lin Yuan felt that it was truly too forceful, and he wouldn't be so cruel to himself. However, Lin Yuan had a second method, that was to use the source sand to bury underground and travel until he was right underneath the flame vortex. The source sand had already scouted the road ahead for Lin Yuan. The flowing flame energy inside the valley may have the gold phase attack power, but the temperature inside the purple-black ground wasn't considered high. Furthermore, when it was closer to the fist-sized plant that contained massive spirit chi, the temperature would be the same as the temperature outside the valley. It might even be colder. Therefore, traveling underground was the best choice. Earlier on, the two adventurers who spoke to Lin Yuan had turned around, and when they turned back, they noticed that Lin Yuan was already missing. The duo quickly looked at each other and swallowed their saliva. One of the adventurers said with astonishment, "Oh my god, that kid got burned too quickly, right?" The other adventurer realized that what he wanted to say had been said first. Therefore, he felt choked up. After a long time, he finally said, "They said that women are made of water. That masked kid wouldn't be made of oil, right?" At that moment, the duo suddenly heard an exclamation from the side. There was a middle-aged auntie who wore pelt armor and looked rather wealthy. She was covering her mouth and screaming, "MMMFFF, MMMFFF." After a long period of muffled screams, she then shouted, "That kid got eaten by the ground." Lin Yuan was now 5 meters underground. However, he wasn't miserably squeezed between the sand. He was inside an iron cave that was made by the chain blade. Lin Yuan stood in this chain blade made with ferromanganese and didn't even dare to move an inch. Even though Lin Yuan was the source sand's contractor, the ferromanganese's metallic properties wouldn't recognize its owner. A random movement would allow Lin Yuan to feel how a potato got its skin peeled. Soon enough, Lin Yuan was lifted up to the surface by a giant hand that the source sand formed. The moment he left the ground, the chain blade quickly fused back into the sand. Right at the moment of imminent peril, Lin Yuan suddenly felt something. The source sand instantly formed 1,000 pieces of feather made with the day and night silver and formed 4 wings. As soon as the 4 wings were formed, Lin Yuan immediately injected spiritual power, transforming the black wings into pure white wings. The white wings wrapped around and protected Lin Yuan in the center. Subsequently, 3 violent energy blasts struck Lin Yuan's white wings. Even with the Gold Eye Fantasy 1 source sand strength, along with the day and night silver's shock absorption properties, Lin Yuan still felt a significant impact. This impact made Lin Yuan feel pain in his innards. The impact might have inflicted pain to Lin Yuan, but there wasn't any physical damage. Had Lin Yuan not been constantly thinking about the fate-trapping metal shards and being 120% cautious, this surprise attack might have dealt severe injuries even with the defenses. During this month, Lin Yuan was already used to the ruthless methods of how people were killed to obtain treasures. However, he didn't expect anyone to be ambushing here within the valley and killing adventurers that just arrived. At that moment, Lin Yuan could hear 3 coarse voices from outside. "Big brother, is that kid dead yet?" His reaction was truly fast. "Not dead yet. Didn't you see the white wings are still closed?" "Big brother, what is that Fae? How is it able to grow wings on a person? I have never heard of it before." Lin Yuan's white wings immediately received more attacks from Fae abilities. The three voices were obviously from three Spirit Chi professionals of the same team. The attacks received earlier were from 2 Pinnacle Gold Fays and 1 Platinum 2 Elite Fae. Since it was an ambush, then it was obvious that the trio had used at least 80% of their strength. Lin Yuan's cold voice suddenly echoed under the white glistening wings. Flare up, source sand. Once Lin Yuan gave the command, the purple-black ground within the valley collapsed and formed a quicksand that was close to 1 kilometer in radius. All of the quicksand formed layers that were constantly pushing downwards. As the quicksand was stirring, it felt as though everything was going to be pulled close to 100 meters underground. Upon hearing the three-course exclaims, Lin Yuan's pure white wings opened up and instantly turned black again. Chapter 269, Twin Red Pagoda and Disc. The black wings were absorbing the light within the valley that was already scarce. It felt like an ink-colored ripple that was devouring the light in the air. Before Lin Yuan received the attacks from the trio, he had constantly been cautious and on guard. Then now, the trio was truly caught unprepared by Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan flapped the 4 black wings and stood on the palm that lifted him above the sea of sand. The palm had been blasted by the attacks earlier and was only left with the middle finger. Lin Yuan stood there and controlled the source sand to attack. The 3 Spirit Chi professionals were currently struggling to break free. The 2 Spirit Chi professionals who had Pinnacle Gold Fays had encountered some terrifying attacks under the quicksand. All of their screaming and shouting had instantly vanished while their vitality sank into the quicksand. The Spirit Chi professional with the Platinum Fae quickly yelled, Don't kill me. Spare my life. I will do whatever you want me to do in the future." Lin Yuan heard the response. The icy cold eyes behind the mask were now flickering with murderous intent. "You don't even have a willpower rune. How are you going to pledge your allegiance?" Lin Yuan's words stopped that Spirit Chi professional from speaking any other words to ask for mercy. Without any willpower rune, there wasn't a way to swear an oath with the willpower rune. Without the willpower rune to bind one's words, then there wasn't any credibility. Lin Yuan's icy cold eyes looked at the Spirit Chi professional and his Platinum Fae, saber-toothed hunched wolf, struggle in the sand. Towards anyone who wanted to kill him, Lin Yuan would never be merciful. Even if this Spirit Chi professional possessed a willpower rune and wanted to pledge his allegiance, Lin Yuan wouldn't hesitate to kill him. Anyone who had ideas of killing him, Lin Yuan would never spare that person. Therefore, he would never allow those who wanted to kill him to stay by his side as a servant. Now that the source sand had created an accumulated sand for over a month, its strength was already far beyond the source sand's regular strength. The Gold-Eye Fantasy 1 source sand's regular strength was already equivalent to a Platinum Fae. Now that the source sand was able to control a massive amount of sand that was boundless, its strength was already far beyond the limits of a Platinum Fae. As long as it wasn't a flying Platinum Fae, any Fae that got trapped in this boundless quicksand wouldn't be able to escape. Only Diamond Faes would have the possibility of breaking free. When the source sand created a huge amount of sand to form the quicksand, it was no longer a simple attack method. The elemental source-type lifeform had used its characteristics to form a natural disaster. The Spirit Chi professional and its Platinum Fae rapidly exhausted their Spirit Chi due to the struggling in the sea of sand. At present, they no longer had any spiritual power to prevent themselves from sinking into the quicksand. The Spirit Chi professional accidentally swallowed a few mouthfuls of sand during the struggle. As the sand contained the ferromanganase's properties, it caused the Spirit Chi professional's vocal cord to be shattered from all the grinding. The Spirit Chi professional couldn't even speak now. All of a sudden, the Spirit Chi professional heard an icy cold voice. "How many have you ambushed before me?" The quicksand that had Lin Yuan's spiritual power was the same as Lin Yuan's eyes. He could feel there were plenty of Spirit Chi professionals and Faes that had just died recently within the quicksand. All these Spirit Chi professionals and Faes were all